All right, folks, we're back again. We have GPT-5 on the docket today. We're talking about open source OpenAI. We've got Meta with new text to audio generation, Google DeepMinds, Stack Overflow finally gets in the game, Inworld, a halficorn. Just so much going on. I'm Brett Kinsella, host of the Gain Show. Gain stands for Generative AI News. We do this every week, and we've done this every week for 26 weeks, which I believe, if I do the math correctly, is 1/2 of a year every week. And my colleague, Eric Schwartz, has actually appeared on this show more times than I have. Hey, Eric.
Hey, yeah. It's been, I think we've each had 1 or 2 times away, but it's added up pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that I missed 2 very early on because I was in Europe, like one heading to Europe and the other because, of course, my flight was canceled and I have to stay an extra day. And then I just missed last week because, again, I was in Europe and my flight was canceled. And I was on a plane during Gain. So it sounded like it was a really fun show last week. And I will tell people, if you like to follow up with Gain, if you've missed them, so first of all, you can go to the YouTube channel and watch all of them. Just go into the live tab or go to the Generative AI News playlist, and you'll find all of them there. And normally I put these on Synthedia every week as well. But last week, because of travel and all sorts of other things, the real world got in the way. I actually did not post in Synthedia, our daily newsletter, the Gain Show. So tomorrow, I'm going to have both this week's and last week's in there. So you'll get 2 weeks. And what people like about Synthedia, so a lot of people love to watch us here, which is great. We love you being here too. But a lot of people just like it because we put all the links to all the stories. So they just like have that as a resource. So you definitely check that out. If you're not signed up for Synthedia, just go to bit.ly/Synthedia and join the newsletter. It's free. Sometimes it's pretty awesome. Sometimes stuff you won't find anywhere else, including some analysis we did this week. And if you are out there in LinkedIn land or YouTube land, give us a shout out. Make a comment. Let us know you're here. Really appreciate that. And please give us a like on whatever platform you're on. Subscribe if you're on YouTube, because that helps us for those crazy algorithms. Eric, we've had another really interesting week this week. It's August, and we just came out of July. Usually slow news, but not at all. Mm-hmm. So let's start out with the top story of the week, and that is GPT-5.
Yes.
You wrote about this. It's imminent.
Yeah.
It's coming next week. Why is there even a story here about GPT-5? We're just observing GPT-4, which is maybe the most competent but the slowest of all generative AI chatbots.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because GPT-4 came out early this year, and fairly soon afterward, people were already asking about, is GPT-5 also coming? Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, said they are not training it. He said there's no plans at the moment for training it. So people weren't sure what was going to, what sort of timeline there might be for the next iteration. But lo and behold, a couple of weeks ago, OpenAI went ahead and trademarked GPT-5 with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, or has filed the claim. They haven't officially received the trademark yet. And suddenly there's a renewed interest and speculation. There's speculation that the training has actually begun, and that it's going to be finished by the end of the year, that GPT-5 may be arriving sooner than anyone might have thought. And with the huge leaps in capacity and functionality from GPT-2 to GPT-3, GPT-3 to GPT-4, there's a lot of excitement / broad rumor mongering about what GPT-5 might mean and what it might do to what has already been a very fast moving industry.
I like James Poulter's comment that it'll be GPT 4.2673. Nice call there, James. We appreciate you being here. Shout out to Chris McManus, Michael Novak.
I'll try to fix that echo.
Yeah. There is a little echo, but hopefully not too bad for most of the folks, particularly those who are listening after, because it shows up on the VoiceBot podcasts most weeks as well. Okay, so GPT-5, great stuff. I I don't expect it anytime soon. All the prognosticators said that GPT-4 was going to come earlier than it wound up coming. We got ChatGPT instead, and then GPT-4 came later. They don't need to roll these things out more than once a year. People are still absorbing that. There's barely anybody using the large context window GPT-4. GPT 3.5 Turbo, really popular in the chat applications. I don't see this. I think really the thing that would make me believe that they're going to roll out GPT-5 sooner is if they needed a new foundation model in order to fix the GPT-4 latency problems. Way too slow in response times.
Yeah, and it's worth saying that when OpenAI announced that they would start phasing out some of the very old models from their API and in favor of the more recent ones, and there was a bit of an outcry against that. So there's reluctance to let go of older models, let alone jump into something new. So they may not need to move quite as quickly as they might have thought in terms of making sure that their customers are happy with the models available to them.
Yeah, and another reason why they might not be focused 100% on GPT-5 is apparently they're focused on G3PO. Thanks, Eric, for making some amazing generative AI art here for the Synthedia newsletter. But if you think about it, we had the memo, the very famous Google internal memo about Google has no moat. And essentially what that is about an internal Google researcher was talking about that OpenAI and Google don't have any technical moat, and that the open source was going to take over because it's going to be cheaper, or it's going to be more performant, all these other types of things. Subsequent to that thing, it was confirmed that it was a real memo. I think there's differences of opinion on whether that is actually true. But since that time, we also saw Llama 2 come out. And Llama 2 from Meta is good. Some would say very good, particularly the 70 billion model, which is smaller and faster than what we're seeing from at least GPT-4, if not as performant. And it is a potential risk to OpenAI's current dominance in the space.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that while the rumors had been around about OpenAI looking at open source, that it may have been accelerated by what Meta did with Llama 2, not just that they decided to make it open source or release it without a license fee for most businesses, although apparently there's some contention over that, but that they're already working with Microsoft and other distributors. So it's not just that it exists, it's that it's very easily accessible. So suddenly OpenAI has to think about how easy it is to not only how cheap it is, but how easy it is to get, and whether they can compete with that combination.
Yeah, and James Poulter's got this a whole lot of love for Llama, and I'm glad he said that, because I've been kind of surprised at how much people love it. It's not from a technical standpoint. If anyone else had released it, maybe not anybody else, but obviously Meta's a big company and they seem committed to it, so that actually helps with it. But it's because it's from Meta. I thought some people might be a little bit more skeptical, reserved, anxious about maybe jumping in, but everyone seems to love it. It's like you change your name from Facebook to Meta, you have a disaster for Horizon World in the metaverse space, and then all of a sudden people love you again. So it's very interesting, but there is this rearguard action that OpenAI is trying to play in the open source space, that they could get knocked off their perch by open source, and they're trying to blunt that a little bit. I think it's really clever if they do roll out something really performant, particularly they could just take one of their own old models and just open source it. That's then a path of adoption for people who want to move up to the higher priced and more performant proprietary models.
Yeah, and it's also, there's the way that Llama 2 came out, because it was open source. And yeah, it was not it wasn't ChatGPT. It was a model, but we saw within 24 hours chatbots using Llama 2. So it was very, very quickly as available and as easy to access as ChatGPT and others have been. So it's like it just had just an incredibly fast rollout in that regard.
Yeah. Or I'm saying too, GPT-5 is going to come out when Google Project Gemini is in sight, which I like. It's like, yeah, okay, you bring out your new thing that's so amazing. Wait a second, I got something more amazing. Very interesting. The just one other thing here from Michael Novak around the EU AI Act. GPT-5 is going to come out probably right around the time that, or is right around the time the EU AI Act actually is implemented, and it'll obviously be misaligned with wherever the technology is at that time. That's like something that we can guarantee. Okay, so let's move on. So that was fun. It's always fun talking about OpenAI and all the big players, and we're going to come back to Meta because I got some other news today, but. Our other top story, we like to do two top stories today. So OpenAI news, mostly rumors this week, but also really speak about the market structure pretty significantly. But we have this other cool story here. And we'll talk about this as our Alexa GPT segment. Alexa GPT, the idea of generative AI behind Alexa has been out there in the ether for some while. I heard about this program earlier this year. I know of somebody who's been testing some of these features as well. So it's a little more advanced, I think, than maybe some people thought. But the reason for this news this week is it was revealed that Google Assistant is going to get some generative AI features in the back end. And we saw something a couple weeks ago, which I don't think either of us wrote about, Eric, but it was something we were tracking, which they did a breakdown of the new Android. And Google Assistant has what you would consider in there. There's some code base that suggests that Google Assistant will be able to summarize websites. And so, again, that would be a generative AI feature. So it seems like Google Assistant might become more central. And I have a prediction about this, but I want to get your feedback to what's going on.
Yeah, I think as these are early reports, not official announcements or anything, but the idea that Google Assistant would more fully embrace generative AI and employ large language models it's not a surprising idea. And there are obvious ways that generative AI could really boost what Google Assistant does, especially since it as a voice assistant, it's struggled against Amazon. It's not the default term people use when they talk about voice assistants. And it also
precisely why I called it this segment Alexa GPT. Google Assistant GPT does not roll off the tongue.
Yes. And it also Google's been so focused on revamping Google Assistant anyway, getting rid of the conversational actions, really making Google Assistant part of Android, and really embedding its features within Android rather than as its own standalone tool. And generative AI may be what Google Assistant needs to then have its own identity separate from Android, or at least identifiable as something that's not the same as the Android operating system.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a few conversational AI experts in the room today. So if you guys want to make comments about this, like what you think is going to happen here, a couple of things. So first of all, I believe that they're not going to abandon at all. Yeah, here's from James Bolter, Google Agony Assistant. All right, we like that. We like that, James. Thanks for throwing that in. I don't think they're going to abandon what they have. Both of these companies need certainty. They can't handle a lot of hallucinations. It's different if you come out as ChatGPT and you're new and you're sort of this new knowing assistant, and you tell people, it might be wrong sometimes, but you're so amazing in all these other factors that they're like, oh, okay, fine. If you try to introduce something like that to Google Assistant or Alexa, which are already established, people have expectations around them, and it's sometimes wrong, that's not going to work very well. So my expectation is they're going to implement these arbitrators for queries that can be answered by either the primary NLU-based assistant, Google Assistant or Alexa, or the large language model capability, that they're just going to have to decide which one gets priority. And they're probably going to do lots of checking in the background and all these other things. Because otherwise it's going to be a misstep in terms of what people expect from them.
Yeah, and we've already seen some generative AI tools that using multiple LLMs and accessing different ones depending on what they're being asked and the context for the questions. And what's interesting to me, at least, is that it's sort of bypassing any sort of smart speaker or smart home and going straight into cars. That we've seen multiple experiments and pilot programs of having essentially ChatGPT in your car, not to turn on your not to turn on your air conditioning, but as the tool that will answer knowledge queries, as well as having the car AI there. So I think there's definitely going to be those sorts of structures going forward from voice assistants.
Yeah, and James Poulter just like threw something on the table here. So, basically, there's a lot of things in this comment, but this idea that the LLM is going to be an API, and actually, you could almost treat the LLM like an Alexa skill or a Google Assistant action. That sometimes you just pass it off to that because you've decided that that's the best way to answer the question. Laurent Bernard said that we should have some hesitancy here because Google really pushed everyone to build out their Google Actions, and it was really Google Assistant was accelerated to market. I won't say rushed to market, but accelerated to market because they were worried that Alexa was getting too much traction and they were going to fall too far behind. Bard was rushed to market because there was a feeling that ChatGPT was getting too much traction. My prediction is I believe that the Bard as a brand will go away before too long, and everything's going to the Bard features are going to wind up in Google Assistant. Right now, it's very convenient to keep them separate because Bard doesn't have the expectations of Google Assistant. But Google likes to start a lot of things, but it doesn't like to keep a lot of things around, particularly when they overlap so much. So my expectation is that Google Assistant was going to have a lot of this Bard. A lot of the Bard functionality baked in. Some of it will wind up in other tools that Google has, and that's it. And then Alexa, just like my expectation there is that they'll demonstrate something, but maybe very narrowly released, very narrowly applied in September at their product launch event for Amazon. We won't really see significant changes until end of year, maybe the beginning of the next year. Maybe end of year, though, because I'm sure someone over there is thinking, hey, wouldn't it be nice to sell some additional smart speakers during the holiday shopping season? And maybe some cool new feature based on LLMs will get us there. So we'll see if they can get there. But my understanding is there's a lot of work still to be done.
And remember, Amazon shut down one of the few generative AI-ish features on Alexa recently, the celebrity voices that used some technology to generate new sounds, new words that the celebrities had not actually recorded, and those are going away. And that was one of the rare examples of that technology there.
Yeah. I guess the last thing too is we have this idea of knowing and doing assistants. If people haven't listened to my interview on the podcast with Adam Chire from a couple months ago, I recommend you check out the VoiceBot podcast on that. So Amazon, Alexa, Google Assistant are doing assistants. They execute tasks for you. They're really good at that, interacting with other digital services. Not very good on the knowing side. This is Chire's formulation, which I think is a pretty good one. ChatGPT, these other solutions are really good on the knowing side, except for when they make stuff up. But in general, like very good at that, much better. My expectation is that like you could see the doing isn't close to the doing functions aren't close to being added to things like Bard and ChatGPT. So you might actually get this holistic assistant more quickly from Alexa or Google Assistant. However, I just think they're going to be very tentative about how they roll it out. And ultimately, I'm not convinced people want the knowing and doing assistant together. It would seem it's like logically it makes sense, but I just think that the world is just too messy, and people are pretty good at actually segmenting different types of solutions, applications based on what they want to do.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what the shape of the market will be in a year, so I don't think they do either.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura Bourdain says an assistant from OpenAI themselves. Any view? Yes. I think GPT is their assistant. It's called the assistant if you look at it. And the whole idea of plugins is to add those doing features. But we'll see. Michael Novak, some issues about memory. You know, the LLM can run locally. There's some work on that. We've got some comments from Janice Mandel in here, but I want to move on to the next topic. Really fun, particularly a lot of the people in the room here, like us, have been in this space for a long time, know a lot about this, but really interesting. We'll see how that upsets the apple cart. You know, this is a new market. ChatGPT obviously changed everything significantly. Bing Chat came in, and then, you know, we've got Google SGE, but then Llama 2 comes out, changes everything. There's still room for big disruption in this space. So, okay, so next one that we want to talk about is, let's see here. Oh, I know what we want to talk about next. Funding fountain. So every week we talk about sort of big fundraisers, and this week we had Inworld. Tell me about that, Eric.
Yeah, so strangely reluctant to say how much they were raising at first, but now have confirmed that it's about $50 million, which is a pretty big round, puts their valuation at about 500 million and about 120 million total raised. And Inworld, we've written about them for a while now. We wrote about them since before generative AI was a term being widely used, but essentially they created a virtual character platform that uses generative AI to translate prompts, basically. So you describe a character's look and their personality and how they behave, and the AI uses those that writing to create a character that can then react in new situations and conversations. And the idea being that it could create very realistic non-player characters for video games, that it could be used for training, to train to interact with people, has a lot of potential uses. And they've been garnering a lot of attention from entertainment companies. They were part of the Disney Accelerator. They got a big grant from Unity, from Epic Games, from the creator of Unity. And now they're really, now they have enough money to really sort of accelerate their model into more places, make it more accessible, and even make, going back to what we were talking about earlier, make an open source version of the AI model that powers their creations. And we're going to be seeing them a lot more, I think, in the next couple of years.
Yeah, gaming's a big market, and this idea of having conversational and autonomous non-player characters like out there, I think is super interesting. I might even have something that I'll risk showing on here, which I think is kind of funny. I think the most important thing about this story is I'm hoping people will adopt my term halficorn. So unicorn, billion-dollar valuation. Some people think it's because they are sort of unique. You don't see them very often. No, there's a lot of unicorns out there. It's because it's like 1 billion. There's a decacorn, which is 10. But why not a halficorn? Because that's half of 1. So 500 million. So please, everyone, please spread the concept of halficorn. I just want to put something into the common lexicon here in the tech industry. So this idea of interactive characters, fast-growing markets, makes these solutions more engaging. Just seems obvious. There's another company in the space too, Convey, which I think is really interesting. They're tightly affiliated with our friends over at NVIDIA and are part of that Ace for Games rollout. So I just expect to see a lot more in this space. And it sort of goes back to like what we've talked about, these conversational ideas, whether it's an assistant or something more from an entertainment standpoint. There's been a lot of work done in this space over the years, and now we're starting to see it come to fruition. And by the way, like a ton of momentum in this space, mostly manifested through Inworld right now, just like one thing after another. The fact that they're getting this valuation, some of the other companies in the space are going to start to grow really quickly, just shows that they're getting some traction.
Yeah, I mean, they did a demo for us like almost 2 years ago, and it was pretty impressive then. It's come a long way just since then.
Yeah, and James Poulter said Meta's about to start playing in this game soon too, and so there's a link in there. Yeah, it makes total sense because actually, Inworld, the day they launched their product, we're on the VoiceBot podcast. So if anyone wants to go back to April 28th, 2022, you can sort of listen to where they were. And actually, if you see what they did over the summer and everything when they were in the Disney Accelerator, they really were focused on these metaverse applications. Now their metaverse is out of favor. Now they're really talking much more about games. But it's also because that's where the traction is. They've got a couple of examples of some games that they've done. They make them more immersive experiences. There's huge growth in that space, continues to be. So I think that's going to be really interesting. Yeah, and so like Michael Novak's talking about spatial being the new metaverse. And I think the other thing about it is like it's beyond just this conversational ability. There's syncing of the mouth and the character actions to the conversation. They're also building into all these platforms observability, so that NPC actually knows what else is happening around, so they can react if you say something about that car that just drove by. It'll have some recognition of that. So really cool stuff. I love to see these entertainment applications that are coming about that pull all these things together.
Yeah, they're going to be doing well. I mean, whether or not they stick to it, or they become the next Pixar acquired by Disney, either way, they're going to be an important player in the tech space of that.
All right, then we'll see if I can get this thing to work, because I thought this was kind of funny. Let's see.
So why are you here?
I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that I'm here to fulfill some kind of destiny.
Okay. Do you think that we live in some sort of simulation?
Maybe. I just don't know for sure yet.
Do you think that you're real, I'm real?
I'm not sure what to believe anymore.
What if I told you you're in the Matrix, buddy?
That would explain a lot, but I'm not sure I want to believe it.
What if I told you you're an AI?
That would explain a lot.
So in any event, I just thought that was sort of fun. Like, this is this idea you can ask a lot of random questions. We showed something which didn't come across quite as well with the NVIDIA piece. I think it's just like, it was actually a better interaction with a character, but I think we had technical issues when I was trying to show that a couple of weeks ago. But I think that's a really cool space. Next story up, we're going to get into the product garden. So new products being released. Meta has a new text-to-sound engine. What's going on there, Eric?
Yeah, so we'd written a while ago about they had created a text-to-music tool called MusicGen. But what this is called AudioCraft. It combines not only MusicGen, but a different tool that is focused on natural sounds and non-music sounds, and also working with this decoder called Encodic that really cuts down the amount of training needed to make it sound good. But the result is AudioCraft, which basically means that you can create a soundscape, not just a musical thing, not just a nature background, but you could create the sound of an outdoor concert, for instance. And it's honestly pretty good in terms of turning text prompts into music. MusicGen at the time when it came out also offered a way to use an existing audio sample as sort of a starting point to riff on. And it's not that it's going to replace high quality songs written by people or the actual sound of nature necessarily, but I can see that there might be concern among composers who do more corporate or educational work, that this might be the cheaper option rather than hiring them to write the score for a marketing video, things like that. It's and the fact that they're making it open source, which goes back to what they've been doing with LLAMA, means that the adoption speed is probably going to be a lot higher, certainly at first, in terms of experiments and pilot programs. So this could be Meta really carving out a way for it to have the lead in at least one aspect of generative AI.
Yeah, so Meta's strategy around just going open source top to bottom, and then using proprietary versions for their own applications is a really good one, because really what they're trying to do is grab some mind share and get people to develop on their platforms. If people develop on Llama, if they use the new audio solution, then guess what? They're going to be adding new features that'll automatically integrate into the applications that Meta has, whether it be Horizon Worlds or Facebook or Instagram or Threads, if anyone's still on that 50, first to 100 million, first to lose 50 million users. Like that's the important thing I think about Meta. The other thing is just like about the soundscapes. People don't really think about that as much. We had VoiceMod's CEO Jaime Bosch on the VoiceMod podcast about 6 weeks ago, and the VoiceMod's really known, again, gaming like is where they took off, but they're known for voice changers and like to be able to change your voice and all these different types of things, whether it be celebrities or cartoons or change from male to female, all these other types of things for fun. But one of the things he stressed is he said, the people that are our customers, they want soundscapes as well. And so when we think about the full digital experience, we've focused a lot on the visual in the conversation is being really interesting. Sound is really starting a big step up. We'd heard a lot about synthetic voices and the quality of them, but now we're just going to that next level. So.
Yeah, and I think it's not that there aren't other. Yeah, as Michael Novak says, there are other generative AI or AI products like Veritone that have either started or have begun using LLMs for creating scripts and background audio for videos and audio experiences. And I think that Meta might crowd them all out just by virtue of being open source and relatively accessible.
And then Janice says, then they sell them a fake detector, which is totally true. I don't know if we even talked about this. I don't even think I have it on the list today. Maybe we'll come back at the end if we have time. But did you guys talk last week about OpenAI shutting down their?
We discussed. We discussed how they were shutting it down and for text, and how there definitely is more focus on coming up with detectors for deepfake audio, deepfake video, and deepfake images. But it's going to be a war of attrition in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. Which is funny too. All the synthetic voice, their companies are like being good citizens by rolling out voice detectors for their own voices, but most of them actually just say it's going to be a much bigger market where they can sell into than the very crowded market they're in today. Okay, so another story. Apple pulls 100 generative AI apps from Chinese App Store ahead of new rules. And there's two stories here. The Chinese government introduced some new rules about generative AI, and now there's the domino effect. What are the reactions to that?
Yeah, it's China's been well ahead of the EU and especially the US and other major markets in terms of writing rules for how and when you can use deepfakes, how and when you can use synthetic media in general. And while those rules have been being put together, there's of course been a rush among Chinese developers and international developers to come up with LLMs and tools that use those LLMs, like ChatGPT, putting out various apps. And now the rules are officially set to come into effect. And they involve, getting a special license and having to follow a lot of rules that, as I point out in the article, it's like, okay, yes, they don't want to hurt national defense, but I don't know how many, certainly American apps that are in the Chinese App Store will abide by the rules of socialism, as China puts it. So Apple's just saying, all right, well, those apps have got to go until you can get your license, until you can say, yes, I'm allowed to sell this software in China. That's it. And we'll see how much that affects other regulatory groups around the world. But at least in China, it's going to be harder to thread that needle.
Yeah, and I think in China, it's really interesting to see they're sort of trying to create this balance. They want to be the leader in all forms of AI, including generative AI. They want to have that innovation engine. At the same time, they want to have some semblance of control, which we've known about for a long time. And what is that balancing act? I think it's actually very interesting for Europe and the US and some other regions to actually see that as an objective example, because they're going a little bit more aggressive about this. Europe's going to be aggressive, but not as aggressive. And then the US is still sort of up in the air. And we'll see what that does. It's like a real-time experiment about how that impacts the industry.
Yeah.
I think that it might be that unfettered regulation, or like no regulation, you can do anything you want, might lead to more innovation. But we don't know that yet. We're going to have an objective example right in front of us. We'll be able to watch the experiment unfold.
Yeah, and it's worth saying. I mean, there's two aspects. There's rules about process and rules about the output. And China's rules cover both, but are particularly focused on the output, which is the part of generative AI that is impossible to strictly control unless you make it so that it doesn't really do. It's no longer generative AI, and that's kind of how it works. So it's going to be interesting to see how they try to fit both of those requirements at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, folks, this is GAME, the Generative AI News Rundown. We do this every week on Thursdays. And recently we've been focused on the 11 a.m. Eastern time slot, or Eastern time slot. Yes. So join us. You can always watch these shows afterwards on VoiceBot's YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/the @ voicebot AI. So you guys can find that there. And let us know what you think. Let us know of any of these things, weigh in. And I'm going to give you a little assignment for those of you who are going to be around to the end, which will be in about 15 minutes. We do winners and losers of the week. And so I'd love to hear what you guys think are winners and losers of the generative AI world of the week. Eric and I are going to weigh in on this as well. It's like kind of a fun little segment. Not everybody appreciates it, particularly the losers, but sometimes the truth is the truth. Okay, so Google DeepMind shows off new generative AI robot. What's going on?
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. It's Google pre-ChatGPT. Google would regularly show off better robotic interfaces, better languages, and showing how the robots were getting better at understanding people's natural language and getting better at extrapolating from their training into new situations. And that's basically become the way that these generative AI chatbots operate. They're trying to extrapolate that way. And now this robotic transformer 2 RT2, which Google DeepMind calls a vision language action model. The idea is that you can train a robot to throw away trash. You point to a piece of trash, point to a trash can, and say, when you see this, when you go ahead and throw this away. And the next time the robot sees something similar on the ground, it will also pick it up and throw it away, or understand what a trash can is. It's the way that people educate each other. We teach something, and then something related comes up, and we are able to extend what we've learned before to something new. And I think that this is going to be, it's definitely necessary for robots if they're going to use LLM style conversations to understand what people are saying in new places. You don't want to have to train your robot from scratch. If you buy from the store, you want it to come pre-trained in understanding its chores. So but I mean, as much as DeepMind has been bragging about this, and as impressive as some of the demonstrations are, honestly, the LLMs are already pretty good at this. We've seen someone essentially strap ChatGPT to one of the Boston Dynamics robot dogs, and while far from perfect, it, without any extra training, was able to start understanding commands that ChatGPT, the language that ChatGPT understands, translated into commands that the robot could follow. It's happening quickly.
Yeah, I still think we're a ways away from robots being in demand.
It's really
they're cool. I love the videos.
Yes.
I mean, and like, we're seeing this. It's like security, war, those types of things. So like immediate applications for everyday stuff, maybe a little harder. Plus, we'll get frightened by these things. That robot dog is pretty menacing. Yeah. Okay, so next story. Stack Overflow. All right, so they came up with their new solution, OverflowAI, generative AI. There's like a big backstory here. So first of all, Stack Overflow in December banned ChatGPT from, or anything generated by ChatGPT from their forum. I have not seen that rescinded. I believe it's technically still in force. Is that correct?
No. So what happened was they changed the rules so that it wasn't that you couldn't use it anymore. It's just that they weren't they told the moderators to treat it differently, essentially, rather than having it be a sort of blanket ban, or have the ban be as obvious. But the overall attitude had continued to be, we don't want to see generative AI writing the answers to our users' questions.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and actually the way it came out was just like, oh, these things are very wrong. They're often wrong. But really the issue was they have a review process. Every time something gets posted, like people try to review it and make sure that it's right. And they just didn't have enough community moderators to review all the stuff. So it's like, we're going to solve our problem by eliminating this access. But okay. And really right along, they were sort of pushing back on this until April, when a blog post from the CEO came out saying, hey, listen, we're going to do this too. Isn't this great?
Right. Because what had happened is their traffic, it took a huge nosedive immediately.
Cratered. Yeah. They had already been losing traffic. And in fact, for over a year, they'd been losing traffic. There were sort of other sources, but then GitHub Copilot launched June of last year, and that led to a further increase. And then once particular ChatGPT, but then an upgrade to Copilot came out in the spring, a further drop. Cody came out at the same time, Code Whisperer right after that. And so if I can just ask a chatbot like the answer, do I really want to wade through all these different comments in Stack Overflow? And so I think this is the same problem that Quora faced. Is an existential threat. You've got this community knowledge sourcing, which has value. There's no question about it. There's a lot of value there, and in many ways more valuable because it's validated than what you're seeing with ChatGPT, but it's not as convenient. And even when you do it, it's like very often it's not like something that you can instantly translate into the solution, as opposed to the 2 seconds, like, fill this in, please.
Yeah. I mean, it's what Stack Overflow offered and offers is incredibly valuable. It's just that the average person doesn't need to have perfect answers every time when they ask a question on Stack Overflow. Sometimes if they get an answer that's mostly good, or that they can extrapolate from to solve whatever problem they're working on, I mean, that's often all they want, really.
Well, yeah, and actually, if ChatGPT does give you an incorrect answer, or GitHub Copilot or something like that, kind of instantly. So you just tried it instantly, and if it works, like, keep moving. If you try and like you just try to run it and it doesn't work, you're like, oh, okay, we'll just go to Stack Overflow and see if someone else can help me with this. The other thing about it is OverflowAI is very limited in what's being rolled out. It's going to be an alpha this month, available to a very limited number of folks. It's really just going to be summarizing Stack Overflow posts already, or just replicating Stack Overflow posts, putting up. So this is sort of a tentative step. I mean, we saw this, Quora is trying to figure out, like, as an expert knowledge base, what they should do. They're trying to, use all the data they have to fine tune some of these other chatbots and things like that. But I think it's tough when you have a business model that was pretty effective in one era, but a technology comes in, disrupts it, and all of a sudden it doesn't look that valuable in the way it used to.
Yeah. And I mean, the value of things like Stack Overflow is that you have this collective knowledge of all these users and people who are interested in sharing that knowledge. And that's basically what generative AI does. And while I'm sure there are novel problems posted on Stack Overflow, I would guess the percentage of genuinely brand new, never before discussed issues is pretty small.
Yes. Okay, enough on Stack Overflow. Sort of beat that dog. I hope they come around. It's a great community. And the other thing too is, my write-up last week was very extensive. I don't remember. It's probably 1,500 words or more. People want to see that, you can go to Synthedia. But the community is probably more powerful than the data that they have, because the data now has been indexed and made available to everybody. So think about what your asset is, focus on your community. And they sort of they talk about technology, content, and community. It should be the other way around, because if you've got a very big community of developers, that can actually be really valuable, particularly for these novel things that maybe novel problems that aren't solved by the code generators and those types of things. Okay, so you had another story this week about Artifact and voice clones. We love that. Voice clones. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Artifact's an interesting company. It's put together by the people who created Instagram originally, and it's, in some ways it's a fairly simple news aggregator, but with the twist being that it more aggressively personalizes your news feed more than Apple News does or Google News does. It really tries to learn what kinds of stories or where and kinds of writing that you want to read. Kinds of news you want to read. And so that's been its purpose until now. And now they're going for having the stories be read to you, and not just read to you in a sort of generic voice, but 30 different voices, including 2 that are specifically based on celebrities, Snoop Dogg and Gwyneth Paltrow, along with a bunch of voices that have sort of generic names that are very obviously supposed to be characters or celebrities. They have a voice called Dwight that is very obviously supposed to be Rainn Wilson from The Office. They have Mr. President, which just sounds like Barack Obama. But yeah, it's using the synthetic voice capabilities of AI to have your news read to you by basically your personal news anchor. And I think there's going to be a lot of focus on who's doing it and where who's being paid for these creating these voice clones. But I think that personalized voices coming from all of your devices is very much the wave of the future.
Absolutely. Excellent. Okay. So I want to move into winners and losers of the week. The first loser suggestion is from Laurent Prudent. Google's gone back and forth. And I think what he's referring to is sort of Google. We've got Google Assistant. We have Google Actions. No, we no longer have Google Actions. And, sort of like lay off a bunch of the Google Assistant team. Oh, no, now we have large language models and Google Assistant's going to get that. Basically doing a head fake here and there. I thought that was really interesting. If anybody else has winners and losers of the week, try to throw them in there if you want. Let's see. I'll start off with a winner. Because I think I want to actually reach back a little bit. We could say like someone like Inworld, they raised a lot of money, but I actually think the winner is ChatGPT, because I didn't get to talk about this last week, although I think it actually broke right after that anyway, the game show. 1 million Android users. And they did that in basically the same amount of time it took ChatGPT on iOS to get 250,000. On Android, they got 1 million users. And maybe the decline, the supposed decline in interest in ChatGPT was overstated last month.
Yeah, I would agree, and it's also points to, I think, international appeal, because there's just more Android users overall worldwide, and so it wasn't immediately available globally, but that's the Android adoption has been very, very high, and I feel like is not going to slack off like Threads, for instance.
Pent up demand for sure. Okay, give me one winner and one loser, Eric.
For my winner, I'm going to have to say Baidu, the Chinese tech giant, because despite all this fighting and issues over regulations there, Baidu's very well connected with the government. They're not going to face they'll know what to do in order to pass the government's rules, but they've made a deal with a pretty major car company, a Chinese car company, and with a Chinese car AI company to bring Ernie, their LLM, into those cars, into the virtual cockpits created by this other company. And I think that they're going to leap ahead, and if not dominate, then at least become a default for how generative AI in vehicles is used in China, which of course has quite a large market.
Yeah, and Ernie, like the numbers coming out of Baidu on Ernie are pretty impressive. I know a product manager over there is working on the Ernie LLM, and he keeps sending me stuff. So I'm like, I plan to do a story in Synthedia about this, because there's a lot going on. It's just like there's always so much going on. It's like, when do I fit it in? But yeah, this is just another example of of what's going on there, and that is a large market, and we'll see too, because I think that some of these are going to expand beyond Chinese language very soon. What do you have for a loser for us?
Possibly the most long operatic death in the history of technology. Microsoft Cortana, who I feel like I've been saying it's dead every other month for 3 years now, but it's the Cortana app has officially been removed from Windows 11 because of Bing AI and Generative AI being the official killer of Cortana after so many other things have killed it. So this actually might be the final death knell for for what has been, as I said, just the most lingering death of any tech product I can imagine.
And maybe the best brand in the space. I mean, like Alexa was better known. Google Assistant has no brand. Cortana was always kind of cool and edgy until it fell behind and then just got neglected.
If you want some nostalgia, look up the old ads for Cortana and how they were making fun of Siri at the time, and it's amazing the arc of that product since then.
My prediction: Cortana comes back, and probably it'll come back before Clippy. That's what I would guess. Although Clippy's sort of back anyway, because there's like fan fiction.
It's fan-made Clippies
around Clippy. Okay, my big loser is actually Stack Overflow. Probably not surprising. I mean, come on, guys, like get your act together. This is an opportunity for you. You could just embrace this stuff whole hog and be the developers solution for this. You could build up your community, but maybe they'll come around. I think, and I think they'll probably think that my comments are unfair. We're doing this, but I still think they have a very naive view of how the market is changing, particularly in their space, and how much they could do with it that other people could not. So we'll see. All right, folks. This is another episode of Gain, Generative AI News. We've brought it to a close. I hope everybody enjoyed it this week. Give us a follow on YouTube, please. And sign up for Synthesia and check out VoiceBot.ai. So like daily newsletter, daily news. Guess what? You're going to have something like 800 articles between those two sources on generative AI. So if you ever want to see what's going on really quickly, just look at the index. And on VoiceBot.ai, you can do it really simply under topics. Just go to generative AI, synthetic media. It categorizes all those for you. Read the headlines. You'll get caught up really quickly. Or join us every week. Give us your comments and suggestions and questions during the show. I hope to see you back next week. Thanks a lot for Eric and Andrew for sitting in for me last week, and everyone else. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and get away from generative AI for a few minutes. Bye-bye.